All right, everyone. We are back with a new episode of With Love Soleil, and I'm super excited for this episode because I have an amazing guest today. Mr. Travis Gray is a transpersonal psychologist. He is a podcast host of Gray Transforms, podcast, which I just had the honor of being on recently. And all around an amazing human being. He is currently working on his PhD. Travis, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's so cool to just watch you give the intro. It's so funny. It's like I love that how this is starting and blossoming and growing for you, and just seeing that light shine through you is really wonderful.
Thank you so much. And same, I really felt so inspired after our talk and seeing you and your rhythm and flow and hosting the ways that you do. So thank you for just all the ways that you show up in the world. I know when I first talked to you, you kind of gave me the rundown on transpersonal psychology. As someone with a psychology background, I'll admit I knew very little about transpersonal psychology before talking to you. So let's start the people off there. Tell us a little bit about transpersonal psychology.
Yeah, that is common with the field of transpersonal psychology because this word transpersonal is synonymous with the word spiritual. So anytime we dive into topics that are spiritually oriented, they are tough to define, tough to shape into words that make sense. And so transpersonal psychology has had that tendency to be tough to define. There are even articles written about what does the field mean and how, just the challenges of definition in the field. But transpersonal psychology is sort of the fourth turn in the field of psychology. If you think of like the bigger field of psychology, there's been four turns. There's the psychoanalytic. Then that is like Sigmund Freud. Carl Jung had a more advanced, I would say, in my opinion, a more advanced and more spiritually oriented turn in that. Some people would consider him definitely a transpersonal psychologist in some sense, because of his affinity to the spiritual aspects and the unconscious and the dream work and all of those things. And then there is the behaviorism. And behaviorism is very much a materialist approach. It's very fundamentally materialist and reductionist in the same ways that mainstream science is today. So mainstream science is very deterministic. It's looking at matter as the only substance that exists. The only thing that exists in the world is that which we can empirically observe. So if we can touch it, taste it, hear it, sense, in our five senses, if we can grab onto it, then we can study, then it exists. But that is a little troublesome for the psychological. So then they have the behaviorism, and behaviorism, there's a lot of negative critiques on behaviorism. I have a lot of those same negative critiques for behaviorism and this mainstream, very orthodox approach. It's very pathological, very diagnosing. I even had I had a podcast conversation with my first transpersonal teacher. Her name is Dr. Nick Walker. She has been brilliant all the years that I have known her, for the last 10 years. And she speaks about autism, advocates for autism rights and neurodiversity. But she was the first person to introduce me to these negative critiques of behaviorism, because behaviorism is trying to get people to change their behaviors in alignment to some standard of normalcy. And so that is the majority of how psychology, psychotherapy is done even today, is this behaviorist turn. And then there was a third turn, that's the humanist turn. And humanistic turn is really well known by Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers was really great. Abraham Maslow is another famous psychologist. And in your like Psychology 101 course, you'll get introduced to Abraham Maslow as the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well, at the end of his life, he was interested in the farther reaches of human nature. He wrote a book called The Farther Reaches of Human Nature. and he's looking at his experiences. I know in our conversation we were speaking about plateau experiences and peak experiences. He was interested in all of these things, and as he aged in his life, he began to have heart attacks towards the end of his life. He was at the peak of his career. And that was a part of like inspiring, just like our life experiences inspire the different ways that we are seeking to discover new things about life. And so a friend of his that I really value, Anthony Sudich, he's not a very well-known name in other areas, but he was so profoundly, fundamentally, one of the fathers of this field of transpersonal psychology. So Anthony Sudich, Abraham Maslow, and a man that is still alive today named Stanislav Grof. Stanislav Grof developed a holotropic breath work with his wife, Christina Grof. Christina Grof was interested in spiritual emergency. I work for an organization that she originally founded, which is the Center or the Spiritual Emergence Network. It's like a suicide hotline for spiritual emergency. But this is the gist of like what psychology looks like. And then this fourth turn of transpersonal psychology is it's the study and cultivation of whole human transformation, the whole being, body, mind, and soul. The investments of the whole being are body, mind, soul. So the reason to use the word investments is because this incremental exploration and building on it's the opportunity for the compounding interest of working on your body. Just like a muscle is shaped, your spiritual practices are shaped in this way. You become over time more expansive by experimenting in these ways or exploring in these ways. So that's like a good sort of way to define how transpersonal psychology has come up, what it is today, I think.
Yeah, that is so interesting. You've just given us so much that's so rich. Everything you've just said is so rich and profound in many ways. And I think, anytime you build your career in a study of human evolution of some sort, you're always going to bump up against the challenge of context and language, because how do you study evolution while keeping up with the language that's always evolving, right? I mean, literally, in order to walk the walk of your work, you have to be able to maintain the evolution of the language, because things are always, you're kind of experientially even studying it in some ways as you grow and evolve. And so there's this understanding, I think, for those of us in this work who study even something like quantum physics, right? The science of much of this, or spirituality, or transpersonal psychology, in that you understand that you're sort of meeting reality around the context where it is, but that you're always birthing more of it and you're always creating more. And so I think there are those of us who are the kind of pioneers of language in this way. And we're the kind of the visionary that holds the space for there always to be more, and then experientially seeking the moreness, but also still having to kind of meet reality where it is and give to the people the way that we can, the way that we have it, and the way that we know it now. So I totally feel you on that. I definitely, as someone who's in the spiritual field, so to speak, I've always struggled with how do I define my work, and it's in many ways undefinable, and I'd rather it just be undefinable. I help people, to keep it really simple.
There's really I think two that I know of famous articles. One of them was an academic article published just with the author's name, and then there's nothing. It's a blank article, and the sort of wisdom behind that is that, like, this is the closest way to define the it, or whatever, that spiritual thing. So it was an academic article, but it's just a blank page that was published. And that's like, oh wow, that's that has like spiciness to it. That's like, oh wow, that's dope that you did that. I know one other article, a gentleman in the field of transpersonal psychology, his name is Harris Friedman, and he wrote an article very similarly, and he even he cited that like blank article. And these things are undefinable. The best that we can do is point at the thing. We're not able to. We can, and that is even a little complicated. Well, can't you just say God? Can't you just say that? Can't you just say certain words? A lot, like there's certain words where the context of culture has developed this language to try to speak to the thing. But when you explore and experience and grow wise in your spiritual practice, you recognize what the ancient Hebrews really did this well, is that they had this way of speaking about God, that they believed that if you said the word, that is like it's like an omen. It's bad luck, because how dare you or I, this limited existence, try to put a box around that infinite thing that is creating all of this now and forever. And so it's really fascinating. Another thing that you mentioned is, like, this is hard to do. It's hard to live where you are, Soleil, like on the edge of like spiritual exploration. And this has been a challenge for seekers all of eternity. Whenever you're living on the edge of things, I have a really cool friend. He's a transpersonal therapist. I think he's Spanish. I think he's from Spain, but lives in Costa Rica. His name's Frederique Soma. He had a really great, all of his content on like Instagram and things is always in Spanish. He's a majority Spanish speaking. But one of his conversations I translated, and it was like the perfect one to translate. He had this, it was like this saying, this aphorism, maybe a Spanish aphorism of some sort. It's like when you're living on the edge, when you're rebelling on the edge of any exploration of an idea, maybe it's like the majority of his content is around relationships. So if you're living on the edge of these relationship dynamics and you're trying to push that edge, you have to be. It's best that you don't have a straw ass. It was like if you're climbing the candle, it's best that you don't have a straw ass, and that was like. The aphorism is this idea that you're gonna get burned. Like people are gonna look at you and they're gonna judge you and they're gonna be like, what is this person doing with their lives? Like, can't they get a real job? Like this dude's a philosopher. This dude, she does Reiki, where she puts her energy out into the world and heals people. People actually get healed by this. I don't, So we have to have thick skin in some way. And that's like the spiritual work that gives us some resilience as well.
It's so, so true. And the truth is that if you are truly working spiritually, you are so blessed by the miracle of life that is always surrounding you and supporting you on your path, that while yes, most humans are not going to understand it, if you in and of yourself and by yourself, in just the miraculous ways that you are supported by these higher forces, and whatever we're pointing to, God, whatever energetics that, are kind of create the highest powers of the universe, we're facilitating them, right? And so whatever that looks like, and we're also facilitating human evolution. And so, yeah, you do. I think any person in any great capacity, anybody who's ever really been in their greatness, has come misunderstood. So I think there's a level of that serves as self-mastery and understanding you're going to be misunderstood by the masses because you're ahead of them in a way, not in a like comparison way, but just in terms of your own personal evolution. When you're deep in your personal evolution, you're, reaching towards the edges, you're on the leading edge of consciousness, so to speak, in doing the work. And a lot of it is experiential, right? If somebody's had a Reiki session, I don't have to say much in terms of its value. If somebody's never had a Reiki session, I'm trying to find the words, I can sort of relate it to acupuncture because it's the movement of energy, and some people have context for that, but then my hands are the needles. So what does that mean? So it's on some level, a lot of it is experiential. And so I think the challenge for all of us is to let it be that a little bit. Let there be some room for the unimaginable in what we do and what we talk about. And while that is very bothersome for some people, the people who love the statistics and the facts and like the hardcore proofs and all of that, well, that exists, and I can spit it to you scientifically, spiritually, psychologically, however you want it. And yet still you have to be able to have room in your consciousness for moreness. And so whenever we present our work, we're bumping up against people's limits, psychologically and spiritually and otherwise. And so you have to learn who you're talking to. To me, the true master is the one who can kind of kick it in whatever language the person can receive it in, even if they're not going to fully understand it, even still. But in some level, you can speak that to them in a language that they're going to kind of understand. And to, tie that into even you speak sign language, right?
Yeah, yeah. My
I love
first
that.
language is American Sign Language.
Your
So
first language, you said.
my first language is American Sign Language. My mother is deaf, and her parents, so my maternal grandparents, grandmother and grandfather, are deaf as well. So I grew up. Sign language is my first language. Yeah.
That is incredible. Your first language. I guess I've never, heard anybody say that.
Yeah.
And what ways do you use that currently?
Yeah, I mean, just in the majority of what anybody that I'm speaking to in sign language is with my mother or my grandmother and grandfather. I'm sort of reminded of this time that I spent a week like in July, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. I spent a week in July in Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas has a pretty good sized deaf community.
Okay.
There's a deaf school, I think, that is right there in
You
a deaf
always
high
drive
school.
by it.
Sorry?
I used to drive by it every day, actually. I know exactly
Oh
what it's
yeah,
like.
you were just in Austin, Texas.
Just left Austin, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So
Yeah.
so they have like I think 1 or 2 deaf restaurants that are deaf owned and deaf ran. When I was in Austin, Texas, like a big thing that I wanted to do was go to that restaurant. I did. It was great. It was Crepes. There used to be a pizza restaurant called Mazzeria in San Francisco that was deaf owned and ran, and the deaf community is so small. When my mom visited me, I took her out on a date to this Mazzeria, and it was really actually that for a while that was a really good date spot for me because they wouldn't know. It's like somebody that I would take to this restaurant doesn't know that I know sign language, and then we walk in and then start signing. It becomes kind of funny. But when I was in Austin, Texas, I had met like there was like 10, 12 deaf women at this one bar all together. And I I had a really amazing time because I first of all, they were all really beautiful women. Second of all, I'm the only person in the place that can speak sign language. And then third of all, I don't often have a chance to speak with anybody in sign language other than my mother or my grandmother or my grandfather, not other people my age. I haven't always had that opportunity. But I'm actually doing my dissertation work, my doctoral work right now is making meditation accessible to a population of deaf students. And in my excitement of meeting these deaf women and trying to just like hang out, and it's just like, it was a night out. It wasn't really anything formal. And so in my excitement, I totally forgot to like talk to them about this experiment that I was trying to do. But that's where my study is right now, is making meditation accessible to a population of deaf students. And I'm asking questions about that thing. I'm asking questions about how we can be informed by that experience. And when I say we, I mean human beings collectively. Consciousness is one mind. And I'm not trying to differentiate the mind of a deaf person and a hearing person, but rather look at how they are common, how these similarities are existing for all of us. And then this is a very understudied population, like grossly understudied population. For scientists, it's like discovering that this tribe existed on this island that's never been touched by modern society. And so now you get to like it's like, but they're just here all the time. And so there's a lot of like fascinating, intriguing things about being able to work with an understudied population. And I'm just the best man for the job as far as knowing sign language, having grown up in the culture, and then being, somewhat of a meditation teacher myself. So to be able to put all of those things together, transpersonal psychology, look at it through that lens, gives us like a really great opportunity to look at consciousness.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, how unique, so unique to you. And I do believe that. I do believe we all have our unique setup and foundation and experiences and things that make us who we are for very specific reasons, right? Like no coincidence in my book. What do they say? Coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous, whatever it is. But especially, in familial setup, the ways that our families are set up and how we relate to our family members and who they are to us and what challenges or, enlightenment they offer us in various ways. Like, it's so crucial to our own evolution if we can see that objectively and use it as a superpower and a strength in becoming who we are. I mean, no coincidence that you'd come into the world with the first language that most people don't speak. I mean, I'm so ignorant on this, so forgive me if that's not true, but I would imagine it's certainly not a super common first language, especially as someone who's not deaf. I mean, even more intricate details there. So, all of the ways that we're set up foundationally, we come into this world, it's like the container for us to really eventually become who we are. And to me, the one of the pillars of spirituality, though, and as someone in that work, is that it is you becoming whoever you are, right? And so some people, I would say, are sort of more light worker types in this field, and some people are more shadow workers, and that both are necessary, right? We want to call often the shadow workers kind of the bad people, right? Because they're more tough usually. But I know for me, it has been major practice to realize that everyone is playing their role. And the most spiritual thing you can do is be yourself, and to figure out even what that means, and then to implement these unique ways that you exist in the world into reality in such a way that hopefully you help people. Now, sometimes I would say the shadow workers are the people who help people by being catalysts for like ultimate towers and challenge. I'll be honest and say my father has been kind of a shadow worker for me, because he's a politician and very science minded, and in the realm where my work is woo-woo, right? It doesn't, unless I can kick it fully scientifically in a language that he can understand, it's completely dismissed. And so I've had to really practice how I talk about things and be in spaces where I can study them scientifically. And because there's a lot of the world that's like that, right? We live in this modern society that relies heavily on structures and facts and context and the ability to speak things clearly and with scientific proof and backing. And I get it, because on some level, if not, there is just hot air. There's a lot of hot air to be spoken. Unfortunately, we're seeing also, though, that in science, there's still a lot of hot air, even if it's provable hot air, it's still,
Yeah, when you look at scientific studies, like some people are they are definitely just hot air out of their asses. Like you look at their method and you're like, what? Why did you think that this made sense? And so a lot of people don't really know how to read articles, don't really know how to read a scientific article. And so you're just reading headlines. That's like modern society, is we're just reading headlines all the time. I've done that before, just kind of read the headline and was like, yeah, that makes sense to me. But then you dive in, you're like, how did this person, what was the, what was the, like, when we're exploring language, then this is a dialectical study. So how are we questioning the words that we are using? By what parameters are we deciding that this makes sense and that does not, and things like this? So it becomes a really strange phenomenon to work with language in this way, and that all communication of any findings is through language. And so are people using the right language? Just the way that they're setting up their studies, if that is somehow incorrect or incoherent, or it is somehow, it doesn't make sense. Like if I read the study and it doesn't make sense, it's because of the language that they have chosen to understand the study with and through. And all of this is really, I was inspired when I was 17 years old. I was like in and out of jail from 17 to 21. And when I was 17 years old, I had a probation officer. His name is Dante. Dante came into my house like every day. He checked up on me. I had an ankle bracelet. So he's my tracker. He's my probation officer. He came in, and I'm trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do with my life? And I asked him for a piece of advice because I didn't have like fatherly wisdom. I needed a father figure. My father passed away when I was 18 months old. I'm older now than my father ever was in life, which is baffling to me all the time. And that was like my first dive into the spiritual, was thinking about my father. But Dante, he came in and I asked him for a piece of advice, and he said, do what you're passionate about and try to make money doing it. And I was like, oh, that's really great. And that has always stuck with me. And then I thought about, what influences my mind to be the way that it is, and sign language, that has been a big one for me. So the way that we use language and explore language is such a beautiful it's such a beautiful thing. It really is. And I love how you just described your father, because in our conversation on the Gray Transforms podcast, you described your mother, and your mother being very spiritually oriented and having had a long life of doing these things, and then having brought gifted that to you, blessed you with that sort of upbringing. So we each have these unique experiences, but you have like that's a really great way to have combined two people, your mother and your father, to create you, Soleil. And then another piece on that topic. I don't know if we did this. I don't think we did. What does Soleil mean?
It's like of the sun.
Of the sun.
Yeah.
And Romero?
I don't. So Romero is actually my grandmother's maiden name. So Soleil and Romero is something I put together. My government name is Danica, which means morning star. So also sort of related to the sun. But through
your first name is Danica.
Is Danica. That's right.
Wow. And that also means Danica? That is cool.
I know.
That's a dope name. Danica? Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. Names, and, kind of on the topic of language and identities, right? And names, obviously, I grew up as a kid as Nika. In fact, all of my family still calls me Nika, and I've been around family the past couple of weeks. So it's interesting for me to be around them, because of course, anybody I meet new with them, I still introduce myself as Nika, because it's kind of awkward to not, and so it's funny, but I love all of my names. I love Danica, I love Nika, and I love Soleil. And I think they each kind of represent a different season of my life. I went by Danica Soleil for a long time. And more recently, I'm considering even either going back to that or maybe Nika Soleil. But I let myself evolve, and I think that's like such a core of what we're talking about here, is letting yourself evolve. And I know for me, for a long time, I was kind of tucked away in the cocoon of my own personal development, and I didn't feel ready to share, because I knew I was still deep in my own evolution, and I didn't want to share until I was like done, right? And then I finally realized I was never going to get done. And so now my work and task is to maintain my own evolution and allow myself to change and shift and grow, even in front of an audience, which isn't always comfortable, but is kind of like the truth of how it goes, right? Because if you're really focused on self-mastery and your own personal development, you're going to grow forever. I mean, so running back to the guy you were talking about with the plateau experiences and the peak experiences, talk a little bit about that, because I think about that all the time.
Yeah, Abraham Maslow for sure, but actually, I'll go there. But okay. So the name, I asked you what your name meant, because this is like there's these underlying narratives of the meaning of our names that a lot of people don't think about too much and don't know about. Well, my name is Travis. Travis is like a travel tax. And then my last name is Gray. And so I got into this integrating the black and white into this non-dual path, this way of looking at spirituality in an integrated way. And so Travis, the travel tax is specifically it's to cross a bridge. So like if you go to a toll bridge and you pay that person's job is a Travis, and they are taking a Travis from you. So you give the Travis a Travis so that you can cross the bridge, and the bridge is like, bridging these two things together. So this underlying narratives, and I love all of the different names. So all of those different ways of Soleil and Danica and Nika and all those things is really, man, Nika is really cool. Do you know One Piece? Do you know this? Do you know One Piece? It's an anime. It's like a cartoon anime.
Yeah, I do. I know what you're talking about.
Pirates and stuff. It's a really great narrative. This is the only cartoon that I watch. It's a really great narrative. Nika is the sun god. And so, and that's like, that's a thing. You'd have to explore it on your own. But Roberto Assagioli is another famous transpersonal psychologist, and he developed this orientation called psychosynthesis. And the idea is that you have, there's a variety of ideas. He has this idea of looking at God in these spiritual ways with this egg model. It's hard to not have a marker board and kind of show what this looks like. But another aspect of the orientation of psychosynthesis was that we have sub-personalities. So for me, when I was exploring and learning about this, I thought about my subpersonalities. My subpersonalities are Travis, Mr. Gray, and Mr. Travis Gray. But I also have my middle name is Lee, so I like this LT Gray thing. So this LT Gray, that's like, you know, I'm like the tiger if it's my Spanish name or something like that. But Travis was my child self. So maybe, you know, maybe for you it's Nika or Danica. It's like the child self, that my grandmother gave me, the things like that. And then Mr. Gray is like my professional self. And that will change soon. It'll be Dr. Gray, you know, and then Mr. Travis Gray is sort of like the attempt at synthesizing both of them. And so I used to always and I still do. I'm always growing and evolving, like you're saying. And I think about the ways that we introduce ourselves. And so I would be notorious for this, like in a class, if we're in a circle or something. People, you'd introduce yourself, everybody's their first name, and I would always introduce myself, I am Mr. Travis Gray. And it was like, well, why did for some people they're like, why is he introducing himself that way? But it was because I am was really important to me. And then to I am and come as all of me. All of my parts are here. I'm showing up as all of me. I don't want to show up as any less than all of me here and in any place that I'm at. But these aspects of ourselves, they can also have like internal conflicts. So my child self, Travis, could be having an internal conflict with my professional self, Mr. Gray, and vice versa. There can be like, Travis needs more playtime. Mr. Gray needs more work. So it's like, oh man, they're kind of bad there. So there's all kinds of things. So it's really fascinating, the many layers of underlying narrative and so know thyself. For everyone listening to this, all of the things are important to explore because you will know yourself deeper. And as you said earlier, to show up authentically, to show up as yourself, to be yourself is the most spiritual act. That's the most spiritual thing that you could be doing. But if you don't know yourself enough, if you haven't explored, if you haven't done much exploration of figuring out who you are and understanding your underlying narratives and rewriting some of those, the trauma, I could forever be, worried about, my mom being deaf, or I grew up not very wealthy, and my mom was a single deaf mother, raised me mostly by herself. My father not being there, I could grow and just be like, I could just settle with that. Like, this is the way my life is. And so there's nothing that can come of it. I can be very deterministic in that way. Yeah. But famous guy, Gordon Allport, he wrote a book called Becoming. Nature and nurture are important in the ways that we are developed, but also is your becoming, your inner, there is an inner substance of becoming, and you get to decide what that is. And then that is what is going to allow you to show up as yourself and do the most spiritual thing that you could do.
Absolutely. Whew. So well said and so real. And again, maintaining the space for your own evolution continuously. And so I think that's where, anytime we name ourselves or label ourselves or define ourselves in some way, we have to be aware of that being in some capacity temporary. I mean, names, they can be as lifelong as you want them to be, obviously. But I think this is actually one of the things that I've always, I'm a psych major. I actually, out of college, was a counselor for some time. And my mother was a psychologist as well. And the things that we would talk about often is both of our struggle with the need to define people in, through the DMV, say, or, the figuring out and putting labels on people, and that needing to be a diagnosis of some sort, because as and from her perspective as a psychologist, in order to, of course, get insurance payment, you have to give a diagnosis, right? And I think in her preference, she wouldn't necessarily always diagnose everybody, right? Because as soon as you put a label on something, it becomes it. Yeah. And so we have to be really aware of that in this field of psychology, of doing that to ourselves, and I worry a little bit about this new kind of wave of labels that exist. I mean, I'm not on TikTok, but I hear it's big on TikTok, but just this kind of almost overemphasis on trying to label yourself as somewhere on the spectrum or with some trauma or whatever it is. As soon as you define yourself by your traumas or by what, the things that in your mind make you or say a weakness or whatever you've decided it is in your mind, suddenly you've put yourself at the disadvantage of that thing. Now, it's never wrong to understand yourself through these types of identities that I think then can help you shape and understand yourself better. I think that's amazing. But I think as long as you have no ceiling to it, right? In fact, I know someone personally who claims that he healed himself from autism. I know him only now, and I would never guess he's on the spectrum whatsoever. But according to him, most of his life, he was pretty severely autistic. And he says through things like energy work and meditation and, homeopathic remedies, he totally healed himself. I don't know anybody else who claims that. It's a pretty bold claim, obviously. But I mean, in who he is now, I believe him because I would never have guessed. And I do believe that he identified as autistic. But even something like that, where, something like labeling someone autistic is a pretty, it seems like a kind of a lifelong thing, right? But to understand that no matter what label you want to give yourself, you have to still keep the lid open for more, whatever that means, right? And
I love that.
I'm even sometimes called an ableist on my, socials because I believe that everybody has the power to evolve. I don't think we are limited by anything. Now, evolution is going to look different to every single person. That's purposeful, right? And so what I look like in my evolution and what you look like in your evolution and what someone else looks like in their, totally different. And meaningfully so. But to me, we all have that potential. We all have potential for moreness of ourselves, no matter what body we're born into, no matter what environment we're born into, as you said. And I love that you've called it that, just this cohesiveness of the becoming. And as long as you lean into that and trust your own becoming, you are limitless. You're really limitless. Like what we can do is limitless. We only use 10-15% of our brain. Like obviously there's a lot more of us to be had and created and understood and to evolve into. And so if you just remain limitless within even the context of how you understand and know yourself, I think that's the key. And that's the code to, the continuous emergence or the continuous becoming.
Yeah. The becoming is like if you're a vehicle, if this physical vehicle is your vehicle to move through the world, to express yourself, to explore the world and all of the dynamics of it, the inner and the outer, your vehicle is not going to go very far if you don't put your foot on the gas. So it's like the becoming is the choosing to put your foot on the gas. It is choosing the direction to go in. And there is like really intelligent scientific arguments, very academic arguments. Sam Harris is probably the premier debater of this, that like he believes in a determined world. Which is crazy to me. There's a lot of like really intelligent people that would just debate this, would have an adversity to the way that we're speaking about this inner becoming. I love that you just said that, your labels, choosing the ways that you're defining yourself without a lid on it, without a ceiling on it. Don't be so rigid. Like give it some flexibility. It steel is not strong because it is rigid. It is strong because it can flex. Like a sword is strong when it has like a little ability to flex, where it can take some force. But if it is rigid, it'll just snap. And so the best things are a little bit more flexible. When we think of like nature, the organicness of nature, it's like it's for it to grow and be able to move and have some wiggle room and to be able to dance and things like that. So we can't have labels that are rigid.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's the true sort of mystic or mysticism, is to, again, just to hold space for moreness. And I think, the true master is the one who can do that with the understanding that we don't even know what that means. Like I can say that right now in 100 years, things could look totally different with all the moreness. And, at this moment, you and I can't sit down and like create a plan of how that's going to go. We just have to live it out. Yeah. And so I think the flexibility in letting there be more than what you can possibly conceive, you know? And I think that's where our kind of current modern society gets stuck at times, because they love to know, they love facts, they want it to be finished, they want a complete picture of what's happening. But do you ever have a complete picture? Like, is there ever, nothing is ever done. Science is not ever done. Psychology is not ever done. Spirituality is like, no, nothing we're ever by no means that we measure our reality is ever complete. It's never finished. There's always more. And so this comes in, a new factor comes in, a new variable, a new way of measuring. And so there's always increasingly more to understand and more ways to understand it. And so again, you know, in our fields, it makes it a little bit more difficult, because we remain from that space, but we also, again, are meeting reality right where it is in this day and age, and talking about it in the ways that we can, and in the ways that people are going to understand it. But I think that's a part of our work, is to let people be uncomfortable with the uncertainty, and let them wiggle a little in the unknown, because it is uncomfortable for a lot of people. And yet it's an absolutely fundamental part of reality. So you can deny it and get uncomfortable with it, or we're going to just hold the space for you to be in your discomfort. And that's actually in some ways catalyzing you, because the more comfortable you are with your own discomfort, and the more comfortable you are in the unknown, the easier life becomes. Because anything you're holding on to in a rigid way or attached to is changing and evolving. So you can cling as much as you want, but you're only working against yourself.
Yeah. I was thinking of also that I posted this clip from our conversation before where you and I are laughing about like, I've never met anybody that's just done. Just like, oh yeah, there you go. You're all finished. And like, what a like, there's something ugly about like taking away the potential of growth that is moving forward. It's like, what if Earth stops right now? It's all done. That is disgusting. Like how are we, you know, that is the ending of all new life ongoingly. Like, well, we would never have the birthing of anything. Yes. No new ideas, no new lives, no new experiences, no new growth anywhere. That is just disgusting, you know? So like, if you are one to believe that you are done on this path, you're sort of delusional. You know, you're just there's a that's a spiritual bypassing delusion that is in your mind. And if you could allow this conversation, maybe if you heard this right now, maybe you know, wonder about it. There are you know, a variety of spiritual paths that have looked at these things in very different ways and in various ways. And you know, the Wu Wei, the Tao, this effortlessness, and this beginner's mindset, all of that framework is to keep you humble. It's to keep you from thinking that everything is just done. Because if you're done here, like, man, it's just, I would be a little sad for the life of a person that is done, because there is so much more that could still become of this person.
Absolutely. And as people who, both of us, have lost parents, you know, even the doneness of a lifetime is subjective, right? Because I know, to me, yes, my mother's life as Tony Trape, that's my mom, you know, her life in the physical form is complete, but her energetic possibility is in no capacity done. And I am a witness to that, right? Like, I am a witness to the moreness of her all the time. And actually, I'm curious, because I know you sort of touched on that a little bit with your dad, and, you know, your connection, relationships to him. Have you, in what ways or not, have you experienced him since his death?
Yeah, I've had very few experiences that felt like direct experiences. He passed away when I was 18 months old. Yeah. So I had like no memory. I have no memory of having, you know, this interaction with him that I'm going to remember that forever, which in some way is sad. And in my spiritual path, it has been, you know, the potential of it could have been anything, you know, and so that has that has just had such a profound effect on my trajectory spiritually, because early on I had dealt with this existential crisis of exploring this idea of death and my father not being there and things like this, and it had been tough. But holotropic breath work, developed again by Stanislav Grof. I had maybe my first or second direct experience was through holotropic breathwork with Stanislav Grof actually in the room, like helping this facilitate this. So Stanislav Grof is like, that is my professional vision is his life. He's like in his mid 80s or late 80s, and he's still like writes and still attends conferences and things like this. So like he's still like, he's just been in the field of transpersonal psychology as his lifestyle. His whole life is just this. And so he's done a lot. He's been very prolific in his career. But holotropic breathwork is there's a lot of fad in the last 5-6 years. There's been a lot of popularity around breath work, this quantum breathing and all of these things. And really the foundation is pranayama. It's the yogic traditions of breath work. But Stanislav Grof, he's like 60s, 70s, had developed holotropic breathwork, which is 3 hours of very intentional breathing with a sitter. So say Soleil, you and I are partners in this breath work. Now you are breathing and I will sit and hold space for you to do the breathing. And so for 3 hours, you're breathing very intentionally. And there's also a background of music that is having an impact on your emotions. It's having like, it has like all of these ups and downs, and as you're breathing and breathing and breathing, and you're dissolving into the intentional breath work, like your sense of being separate from the music is starting to get a little wishy-washy, and those emotions are starting to have like these dips and ups, and that's starting to have like a really interesting effect on your on the images that are coming into your mind. And he's done really phenomenal work with this. Holotropic breathwork he's come up with the condensed condensed matrices. It's like this idea that there are four. Sigmund Freud believed tabula rasa, that we come out as blank slates, that we are nothing. When we come out, maybe we become something around like 1-2 years old, but before that we're really nothing. We're just like a blob of flesh and stuff. But that is so not true. Like I have a way of like describing that. But Stanislav Grof, he believed that there was these 4 stages of pre-birth. And these would show up in the holotropic breathwork, and then some people would also have these past life experiences and other things. So my first direct experience with my father was in some shadow work that came up inside of a holotropic breathwork session, and my father came to me as the wisdom for how to absolve myself, to liberate myself from the chains of shadow. It was like myself and there's like very Carl Jungian ideas to look at shadow as like this dark version, but in like dream work and stuff like this, it's just you, but it looks just like you, but just in this like sort of shadow form. And that's what I came up against. And that shadow, in trying to fight against it, it became the chains that I was like stuck in. I was stuck in these chains, and then I'm like in this like room, in this like cell with these chains around me, and I'm fighting against them. I'm like I'm a fighter. I won't stop fighting against them, but they're not going to give to the fight. And so my father came to me, giving me wisdom for how to get out of that, and how to get out of it was to not fight it. It was to quit fighting it and let it just exist the way it is. And as soon as you do that, the chains release. As soon as you do that, life is moving through you. You're moving with it. You're not moving against life. As soon as you're just letting it happen.
Absolutely. God, wow, that is so beautiful. And what a way to meet him and a space to meet him in, and what a guide. I do believe that our connection to people and spirits are limitless, beyond and forever, but whether they're ever present or they come in and just hit you heavy in the moments that you need them. I mean, what a blessed teaching that he gave you there. Did he come? You could see like him kind of, is that, or was it
Yeah,
more his energy
I
or?
could see him,
Wow.
and I didn't. But this is all happening in the mind.
Yeah.
So it's not
Yeah.
like I didn't have like an experience of seeing him as a ghost or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I'm an academic. I'm a scholar. I'm a scientist.
Yeah.
I'm a scientist of all these spiritual things. So I try to like be careful not to be too biased, not to be too woo woo. Like I just this is the experience as it unfolded to me, and that's good enough. And it was insightful. It was inspiring. It had a lot of great benefit to me for sure.
Absolutely.
But it is wonderful to have these experiences. I think that when you're talking about spirits, when your mother passes away, when my father passes away, when anyone passes away, I always tell people that that the impression, they because their presence has been in your life, they have impressed upon you, imbued in you this strength. This makes your spirit stronger because they were in your presence. It gives your inner faculty to become, that inner becoming thing is now stronger. It's now more capable. Your speedometer to press the gas, it can go faster. You have more capacity to do this because they have been in your life. And that, that I think that's a wise way to grieve and to deal with the losses, because this is also a part of the world. What happens when a physical thing dies or moves on in the world? It dissolves and adds to the earth. So in a spiritual, in a psychological, in a physical way, that presence has added to your life. And I think that they like, when they are passing on to that other plane of existence, they gain all of the knowledge. There is nothing outside of their knowing now. And so like I'm cool with that. Like my father, he knows exactly why his life has ended up in the way that it has, and the kind of influence that it has had on me.
Yeah, absolutely. They solved the mystery. I was agreeing with that with my mom towards the end of her life, that she was getting ready to solve the mystery. And while as her daughter, the most tragic thing I'll ever go through, of course, and also the most magical, because it was so true. She was, taking off the old shoe, so to speak, and solving the mystery. And like, I think we have such a negative connotation of death in our society because, of course, for those who are left behind, of those who travel on, it's not easy. When you lose a person, especially someone like your day one, it's probably one of the hardest things you will ever go through. But also such a major catalyst, such an opportunity to redevelop and redefine yourself, in the energetics of their still being here in some capacity, and whatever that looks like for you, if nothing else, just that their love lives on, at the centerpiece of your being. So, I really always hope that people can understand death and relate to death in a different way, because I think the fear of death is one of the core fears of humanity and all in general, and one of the reasons we are stifled in our exponential growth as human beings, because we do fear death. And we a lot of people move according to the fear of death. And while there's some of that that's healthy, because you obviously want to make wise decisions that are not going to always put you tasting death, but at the same time, you can't make moves fearing death, right? You have to make moves according to what's going to bring you the most life. Yeah. And I think that that's such a key switch. And once you watch someone and witness someone or have experienced someone who has died, you relate to it in a much different way.
Yeah. One of my teachers on my committee, my dissertation committee, her name is Dr. Marilyn Schlitz. She has great work. She's published, very widely published. She's has collaborated with Deepak Chopra. So she's collaborated with Deepak Chopra. That has helped her platform grow in the ways that it has, and getting her books out there. I think she was on Oprah with Deepak Chopra at some point talking about this concept of death. And she has a book, and there's like a DVD that goes with it. It's called Death Makes Life Possible. And that it explores the different ways that different cultures have looked at death and look at death. And it has a it's profoundly insightful to look at, like, wow, I can look at death in so many varieties of ways, and I can choose what works for me best. And it is such a liberation to not fear death. I used to, as I was growing up, I used to say that I was afraid of two things. I was afraid of heights and death. It was always those two things, and heights is really a fear of death. And so I always, if anybody asked me anything that I was afraid of, death was the only thing. And it always had this relationship with my father having passed away, and these existential questions, and I would come across this a lot, and I would always say that my fears are heights and death. And it's fascinating and liberating to absolve yourself of that stress. Like everything is happening exactly as it's supposed to be happening, and you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, exactly in the place that you are right now. And so keep on doing it. Yeah, keep on becoming, keep on exploring, keep on seeking.
You just
I do want to explore this one thing with you as well. If it's okay, if we can go.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I'm interested. I was interested in this in our first conversation. Your thoughts around, what we were speaking about earlier was around this idea of language, of definition, and there's really interesting ways that the definition and language has been impacted by by patriarchal ideas, by masculine ideas, and the ways that our exploration spiritually as a human race has been stifled because of this limiting, rigid box of masculinity that has shaped the way that we speak about ideas of God. And so when we think of God in a Christian sense, we often think of a man. Even like Buddhist, we're only thinking about this male Buddha. Hindu, the Hindu spiritual traditions are some of the oldest traditions of humankind, and they are not monotheistic; they are polytheistic. So there's multiple gods in multiple genders, and some of them are beyond gender. They're not masculine, feminine. They're androgynous. Some of them are androgynous gods, and God, as we understand it in these like alchemical, esoteric, occult terms, like how we have like a common knowledge base around of looking at it in that way. I perceive that's what I gather with our conversations. Yeah. This way of looking at God is like the masculine way of looking at God is very limiting. I think it's better. It's more fertile, in such a very literal way of using that word. It's more fertile to look at God in a feminine way. God, the great mystery that is God. If the great mystery that is God is feminine, then there's just so much begins to make more sense. It makes a lot more sense.
Gosh, I have so much to say on this topic. But yeah, I totally agree. I have always really struggled, especially in, say, the Christianity perspective, that God is a man on a throne judging people. Kind of, I mean, low key, it's kind of not to knock Christianity, because I know plenty of Christians and God bless them. But yeah, I've struggled with that. I was raised somewhat Christian. My grandfather was a Christian pastor. So there was some of that. And then my mom was somewhat, Christian, but mostly spiritual, and didn't care what I believed as long as I, believed it. Yeah. And So I had a lot of room to explore what I did actually believe. And that was the main thing that I always struggled with, of like, it just didn't land for me. If there's this massive universe and we're saying there's some highest power that formulates this whole entire infinite universe, and you're trying to tell me it's a guy on a throne, I can't, it's not working for me. So all in all, to even think of it as a human at all is, quite limiting, I think, because to me, it's just the absolute highest tier of consciousness. But in terms of energy, I totally hear you. I think that, in fact, shameless plug, the video I dropped today on my channel is called Reclaiming Femininity. And a lot of it is about just balancing out the feminine energies with the masculine. And there has been such heavy masculine influence forever, right? And that's, again, nothing wrong with that, because it's shaped the society we live in. Men have literally written most of the textbooks and built most of the structures by hand. Like, I get it, and great work, right? But I think now we're shifting into an age where we have the spaciousness and the limitless, consciousness to start to integrate more feminine ways of being into modern, activities and ways of existing. And that to me is like the flow and the feminine, and it's the fertility and it's the creation. And even in femininity of itself, divine femininity is not only just, grace and ease and calm and peace, as the sort of archetype of femininity, but it's chaos. It's, Kali Ma is, she to me is like one of the, do you know much about her?
Yeah.
Archetype? Yeah. I mean, she has like, a guy's head in her hand and her foot on someone's neck, right? She's not here to play.
It's Kali and, we have to remember this right now. It's Kali, and who is she standing on?
I guess I don't know who she's standing on.
She is standing on a god. She's standing on the masculine god, and
wow.
Kali, and it's also a K, right? It's Kali, and I'll think about it maybe as we explore that. But that's really fascinating, because Kali and a lot of the feminine is the chaotic, and it is the mysterious. It is. The majority of what exists in the world is the feminine. I believe that. So, like, if you think of a thing and the nothing around the things, like molecules on a quantum level, the things are, the phallic. It is the existing material things. That is maybe in some way the masculine things, not good, bad, or man or woman, even just like. Just a word that we are using to point at a specific concept. And so the matter that exists is the masculine, and the feminine is the mysterious thing that all of the masculine has been birthed from. And so there is more of this nothingness that exists in the world than there is of the masculine. And that's like just mind-blowing, really fascinating, deep spiritual exploration to discover that sort of idea. And then Kali is standing on, damn it, I was hoping that sentence would give me the word.
I thought you had it.
Who is this guy? Kali, and man, somebody right now is watching this and they are saying, "You idiot!"
They're shouting at this
or whatever. I am sorry for anyone.
I don't know at all. So you're closer to me.
Don't judge me. But Kali, I love the picture. I love the image. The image is really fascinating, esoteric. But the feminine is the chaos because there's more of it. There's more. It exists in all of these things. It is the nothing. And so the nothing in Hermetic esoteric spiritual language and tradition, in Rosicrucian as well, the nothing is God. Like, it is that no thing is God. In some way, sorry for the Christians, or sorry for the men out there. In some way, a little bit more God than the masculine is. In some way, but also in a more non-dualistic sense, it's all the same. It is all one. But the chaos, the feminine ideas of God, in Hawaiian culture, and you're in Hawaii right now,
Yeah.
a volcano is it is a feminine existence. It's a feminine chaos of the erupting volcano in like traditional, like indigenous spirituality in Hawaii looks at the volcano as the feminine. There's specific words around it and stuff, like names to be used, but because the volcano creates the most fertile soil, the best soil to birth flowers and fruit and food from is volcanic soil. And so so that's really fascinating. So Kali is standing on, why can't I do this? Because we're just focused on the feminine, I guess. Who cares about him? Who cares about that dude?
Next is on.
That dude is. That's like a really special god, and we're just like, who the fuck that guy?
It's not Krishna, right?
It is Krishna, yeah. It's Krishna. But Krishna has many names, so it's it is Krishna, but it's like Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, like that's a Krishna. Just Krishna has more than one name, so it's not that for this image, it's not, they don't use Krishna, but it's Kali and somebody else. But Kali, you're right. She's holding a head. Yeah. She's holding ego. She's holding like masculine personality and like in this gross patriarchal kind of thing. And the word patriarchal for some of my friends that are maybe not so spiritually oriented, they get a little weird about that word patriarchy. But patriarchy, it's a term that makes sense. It is describing something very specific about how masculinity has shaped the culture and the ways that we live today. But Kali has this skirt of like arms and limbs and stuff, this necklace of skulls. And this is all of the egos that have been snatched, all of the egos that have died to the embrace and beingness of one with Kali, of one with the divine feminine. So Lord Krishna, who is laying on the ground, is like, if you're looking up at Kali, Kali has this like chaotic, feminine chaoticness about her, and on the ground, looking up, the god Lord Krishna is looking up as is it Kali and Krishna? I don't even know, but is looking up, and the masculine is contained. Is not chaotic. You'll look at the face. The face is not. It maybe a slight grin, and not a grin, a slight smile, like a very content smile, and that is also an experience of embracing the mystery of the feminine god. Is that you are one with contentment, and there's a solitude, and there's like a disinterested, like God is not so concerned. I'm sorry to say this, but God is not so concerned with all of the destruction and war that human beings have created in the world. Not so concerned, because in that infinite mind, everything is already existing all at once, and all of the reasons why all already makes sense. And so there's like a disinterest or a satisfaction, that is a grace, that is a contentment, a divine contentment. And that is the way to like master the chaotic, the chaotic Kali. And I think that this is an important lesson for relationships, for masculine and feminine relationships, and things like this. So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally follow where you're headed and what you're saying here. And it's super powerful, and it's so rich.
Yeah.
And I do believe that, one of the things I talk about a lot is divine women. And it's my way of trying to put in context the women who are really right now on their evolutionary game, really deep in their work, really, powerfully destroying their own egos and their own non-self attributes and revealing more and more of themselves each day and actively doing that kind of work. And that's, Divine Women is the best way I can describe that, because to me, what that work does then is it creates more space for spirit or nothingness, so to speak, to exist within us and to then be radiated out into the world in such a way that it activates the sameness, that likeness. Call it divine contentment. I actually just led a meditation on equanimity, another kind of perfect word for what you're describing, just true contentment, and I think that that's one of the places even humanity misses the mark, because so many people think they're chasing happiness when ultimately it's contentment. I would argue it's more contentment that we're seeking than happiness, because happiness is great. Never to knock happiness. I'm, a generally happy person, but I don't cling to happiness because I know that there's plenty of lows that life will hit me with. And if I try to cling to happiness, I won't see the full value in the lows and in the depths of life. And so it's allowing all of it to exist while you remain as yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's the true self-master, is whether you're in the highest of highs or in the lowest of lows, you still know how to get home to yourself, and you still bring your most authentic self in that moment with you to whatever encounter you're, met up against. But absolutely in relationship. And I think it's, I talk to divine women all the time who find it increasingly difficult to find men who can support them in their path and where they are. And because men have to really, meet their ego to be in relationship with the divine woman, because her energetic patterning is not going to allow your unaddressed work to exist in the dynamic for very long. So if she's constantly meeting up with your subconscious behavior that's actually diminishing her power or her value, she's going to have to call it out, because we can't afford to be, lost in power or lost in translation to a relationship by a man who's not doing his work. And so, you've seen me talk about this. I come kind of hard about guys doing their work. And to me, we hold a different standard.
Men and women need to be doing their work, for sure.
Absolutely.
Relationships is so challenging.
Absolutely.
So challenging.
Yes, for sure. And family, they say family is, you want to really see where you're at on the spiritual path in some capacity, go spend time with family, because, A, they know versions of you that may not even exist anymore. I'm a whole different name now, B, those oftentimes say families aren't doing the work. And so you're, again, sitting at the table with their unaddressed traumas or issues, and it's obvious, and they're in denial of it. So how do you relate to a person when you can see above their humanity, but the humanity is just the pink elephant in the room, right? And so it's all sorts of relationships. That's why relationships are also just so key on the spiritual path, because it's a perfect mirror and a perfect challenge for you to maintain, again, yourself, not be pulled into their unaddressed needs and work, but to allow their, that to reveal itself in a way that maybe is helpful for them or catalyzes them or not. We can't have attachment to how someone's going to relate to your energetic potentiality or whatever else you bring to the table. You can only just allow them to meet you there and maintain yourself and let them do what they do on their end of the energetic bond.
Yeah, this is an interesting an interesting pictorial, like thinking about this. But like, would you say that, like, or how do you think about the divine feminine as maybe if it's not looking for happiness and it's not looking for sadness, maybe it's looking for peace. So if peace is that divine feminine, or God is like peace and equanimity and all of that, well, the phallic is like the erect and the happy, and the sad and the flaccid. It's the erect and the flaccid. That's the ups and the downs. So that's an interesting pictorial that's going on there. But then the divine feminine, God, the mystery, and another layer to even this conversation is that. While it might be more accurate that of God being feminine than masculine, like being feminine is more accurate of a way, even more accurate is androgynous. Even more accurate is fully integrated. So so it's not easy to be. It's not easy to be the divine feminine or the divine masculine. Like nobody is like having these like perfect enlightened relationships and stuff. But like this is all like a worthy challenge as well,
Yeah.
because you get love and peace and ongoing growth in ways that are absolved of ego and just enlightened.
So true. Yeah, it's so true. And I really believe finding people who can match that frequency is just honey and gold on the path, be it friendships. And, my closest girlfriends obviously meet me there and are just such a key to my personal growth and development constantly, because they can hold space for where I'm at, but can also always see me from the higher perspective. And, obviously I'm always willing to receive feedback and check my blind spots and all the things. So I think that awakened, or conscious relationships are just such soul food, such soul food, and not easy to find. But once you do, it's just like uncovering diamonds.
Yeah. So is it, so in the divine feminine, I'm asking you, is it peace? If you're not seeking like these like high highs and low lows. High highs, you'll find low lows. Is peace that through line?
I think peace could be it. I would say really divinity, which is all of it, right? It's all of it. I think divinity encompasses every dimension of the human experience. And so to me and my experience of this, I'm not seeking one thing in particular, except just moreness and more of me. And sometimes that comes through total destruction and chaos. Sometimes that comes through absolute peak experiences. And I love all of it. And I look for and seek all of it. And I try, my hardest to not resist any of it, because I recognize the inherent value of anything. And to me, that's divinity, right? Divinity is all of it. It is the masculine and the feminine. It is the hardship and it is the triumph. It is the light and the dark. It's all of it. It's the chaos, but it's also the peace. So for me personally, I think I would call it more divinity than anything else. Although as from a human perspective, from my own angle, it is maintaining peace, so to speak, or equanimity within myself, so that when I'm hit with the ultimate chaos, I'm not floored and I'm lost myself. And when I'm hit with the highest accolade and accomplishment, I'm not lost and floored myself. I'm still myself. Yeah. So, I think just the core understanding of who you are and your home frequency, which almost now brings us back to this whole peak experience, plateau experience thing again, of just finding your baseline. It's great. No, and maybe this is how we'll close out, because I really want you to speak on that. But, finding the baseline experience wherein you're almost kind of living out peak experience constantly, because you are on your growth edge and on the leading edge of consciousness. So you don't seek complacency or comfort. You seek shifts and change and more and evolution. And so you call that then a plateau experience, right? Instead of kind of even seeking peak experiences, you're maintaining your plateau in the all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful notion to think that we could live a life of divinity. I like you're using the word divinity to describe like the integration of all of the experiences, that you want to live a full human experience. All of the emotions are valuable. I don't know if I want to live a life where I have never been sad or never been angry. Sometimes I like to be angry. I've liked to be sad. I've enjoyed sadness sometimes, maybe not indulging too long in any one emotion. Correct. Like I don't want to indulge too long in my sadness and depression and things, or my anger and excitement. I don't want to indulge too long, but I have a good time. Sometimes when I'm angry, I'm laughing. I'm like, yeah, like you'll get it, mother. I will get you. That anger is it's a little bit like Loki. It's a little bit like the god of mischief. It's a little bit like that, and that I think is a healthy way to have a relationship with that emotion of anger. But so you want the full experience. It reminds me that there's interesting things about Buddhism and the Bible, Christianity and Buddhism. Nowhere in the Bible does Jesus laugh. There is no laughter. Jesus, for some reason, does not crack a joke, does not have a good time, doesn't like laugh. Doesn't like there's no written anything, and we get like a a synthesized version of the Bible over many hundreds of years and things, but there seems to be no laughter. Why would you ever want to, the medicine of laughter is so valuable. I don't want to live an ascetic life, a life where I'm not experiencing the fullness of life. I am wanting to experience the riches and wealth of life. I believe that is not for me. It is for God, that I am expressing God through my existence and living the most wealthy of life that I can live, and giving that to others so that others can also do that. If I can have an impact and an influence on other people living their most wealthy life, I am not doing that for me. I am doing that for God, so that God can continue to just live a happy existence. In Buddhism, Buddha never cries. Well, I don't want to never cry. I need to release that. Why would I don't want to have that stuck in me. But I also don't want to never have wow, it's so good to feel like a release of a good cry. A good cry, just oh man, that can be a peak experience to have the release of a good cry. It could be described that way, as a peak experience. Well, those are some interesting ideas, but the peak experience and the plateau experience is there are peaks. Rhea White is a scholar. I really enjoy her work on exceptional human experiences. Exceptional human experiences can be defined in a variety of ways. This is the majority of my research interests and work, is exceptional human experiences. This is how I got into the field of transpersonal psychology as well. I was interested in psychedelic medicine, and this peak experience from one moment to the next. Maybe after 6 hours of some experience, whatever, you are now transformed, or you at least convince yourself that you're transformed, and you try to absolve yourself of these habits that are chaining you to your mediocre life, and now you want an extraordinary life and things like that. That's fascinating. How does that happen? Is that can we get more of that? Can we have more people experience this? The next moment that they're feeling fully expressed. But those are peak moments, and experiencing the peak. It's a spike. Spikes are good. It's good to have a little spike here, a little spike. Sometimes I like to spike my coffee. I like a little caffeine. I like a little stimuli, a little stimulant to spark my fire. To have an inner fire requires a spark. You keep the embers warm so that you can spark it. So those spikes are good. Spikes are valuable. But then to keep the embers warm, if you're masterful at keeping the embers warm so that you can start a fire at your own call, like at your own desired or needed call, like right now would be a great time to have a fire. It's good if you're masterful. You've practiced your life ritualistically in a way that has kept those embers warm. And sometimes maybe I need a good spike, I need a good peak so that I can keep those embers warm. The plateau experience is essentially keeping those embers warm. So Abraham Maslow spoke about his life and his plateau experiences after having a heart attack. He had described being able to go to his backyard and have a peak experience anytime he wanted, which I think is really fascinating. It's a powerful assertion and confidence in your own psychological capability that you could just go out there and just have a peak experience. That's amazing. But then he was like, I'm at the end of his life, he's now like, I'm not as interested in peak experiences. I'm more interested these days in what I've called a plateau experience. And this is written in articles in the Journal of Transpersonal Psychology. scribing his speeches. Like he was speaking at a conference, speaking about this idea of now being interested in plateau experiences. And so if you were wanting to live a life of plateau, it's not, plateau has some negative connotation. You know, that was his chosen word. Would I don't know if we would want to still use that, but like that plateau experience, that is keeping the embers warm so that you can have fire when you need to have it.
That's beautiful. And I think that kind of, circles us out into what we're talking about, peace or equanimity or whatever, but you're still, you still maintain your humanity. Sometimes I think when people get so spiritual that they like don't really have much of a personality, I'm like, where'd your personality go? You can't be so spiritual that you don't have a personality. But everybody
I've met a lot of those people that I've met a lot of people that are so spiritual that like their personality looks like this tie-dye mess, and I can't really see it. I can't really I can't figure it out because it's a little messy.
That's right. Yeah. And to me, and again, everybody's in their own place and whatever on their journey, but I do believe that we ascend, root chakra to crown, but that the work then in spirituality is embodiment, which means to pull it back down to root. And a lot of spiritual people stay up here because it feels great and it's fun. You're kind of in that perpetual state of peak experience and you're talking in the 5D and you're feeling the ethers and all that stuff. And it's great. But in a way, there's a spiritual bypass texture to that, right? Because the idea is then to come back down and be fully in your humanity, still have a personality, still be a fully functioning, highly functioning member of society and contributing to the world as it exists in modern times and everything else. But there's not one way to do it. We all have our role. And I know more for me recently, I'm just understanding people's role. I come to understand someone's role more than I do to judge it these days. And that's been a big shift for me because I've been one to judge people at times and I don't want to be that guy. So something I'm always working on, but I think
we want to embrace the many paths. I had like a little Twitter back and forth with somebody that said, they said something like, the one spiritual enlightened guide, like this is the one way, like there was an emphasis on this one way of doing it. And I said, hey, listen, many rivers lead to the same ocean, the one ocean, the one consciousness, the one enlightened experience, the one ocean.
Yes.
Many rivers lead to that. And then we went back and forth. She was not about the many different ways. But there are many paths. And I love to embrace the diversity of the many paths and the many people and the many iterations, because we could be any one of those.
Absolutely. All paths lead to God. Ultimately, right? At the end of the day, all paths lead to God. And I think that's one of the major differences between religion and spirituality is just that recognizing that you are on your unique path, doing what you're here to do in a way that only you can do it. And only you really understand what that means. And it is your work to figure it out and then to live it out. Whereas Christianity or these other religions come with a bit more rules and regulations that everybody should be following and doing. And it just, it creates a box where there's not one. To me, that's why I lean more into spirituality. And there's even a meme that's kind of has, religion in a box, and then the bigger box is spirituality, and above that is just pure consciousness. And I'm like, I'm not even mad at seeing it that way, because I do see sometimes spirituality even putting boxes and labels and limits on things where there's just not. And the idea is to dissolve all of that, figure out who you are, use all of your gifts and all of your advantages and disadvantages to become this, highly realized person. And I do think Jesus got it right in that way. But if I'm being honest, I don't think Jesus would be a Christian. Jesus was never a Christian. And
Jesus was not a Christian. Yeah.
If he came back, I'm not convinced that he would be a Christian. I'm just not.
Jesus was not a Christian. That's a really important thing for people to recognize. Jesus is not praying to himself. He's not trying to find out the word through himself. But he has found it through himself. He has already discovered it through himself. Right. And that is why his example in the way that he lived his life has been so immortalized in culture and things.
Yeah. He got it right. I mean, he figured something out. We're still talking about him to this day. He's still absolutely impactful in every dimension, and you can't knock the guy. And I think he's amazing. I think he was absolutely an ascended master.
Yeah.
But again,
is a gangster. We're homies for life.
OG,
for sure.
OG. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Soleil, this is just like, it's so wonderful to connect with somebody that has like, I always feel this way about the tribe or about other people in the field and in the field of transpersonal psychology, or it is always, it's always at some level intimate to me. It's always at some level like really touching my heart to be able to connect with somebody so special and to have like such an extraordinary conversation. And I think the conversation that we're having ongoingly in the variety of ways, whether you're doing it in your solo cast or your podcast with other people, but that conversation that we're having about self-improvement and spiritual development and all of that, that is the most important conversation that anyone could be having. I always feel that way. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for allowing me to be with you on your platform and have this conversation.
Absolutely, Travis. It's totally an honor for me too. By the way, anybody watching this, feel free to also check out mine and Travis talk on his Gray Transforms podcast, because it was equally mind-blowing and truly honor to have you, Travis. You're the first man I've had on my show, so I'm just fitting and perfect. So thank you for your time. Tell the people where to find you.
Thank you so much. I can be found Mr. Trav G. So MrTrav G. So it's like Mr. Travis Gray. And earlier when we were talking about psychosynthesis, is just all of me showing up. Eventually that'll be Dr. Travis Gray. So
yes.
Right now I work on my dissertation a lot. I'm working on finalizing that PhD, getting that under my belt. That has been my path. And I am sure to have more things, emerging after I make it to that next chapter and that next step. But Gray Transforms, again, that is my podcast. I speak with transpersonal professionals, people that we're having this conversation, this most important conversation we're having constantly. So I'm having that with different spiritual professionals. Soleil was on there. I'm really reminded of Valerie Genghis. You remind me of her story. It's very similar. I would really love for you to check out that episode. That was a while ago, but I've had just many great guests are always on the show, Gray Transforms. So definitely check out that podcast, and you can find that on Spotify or YouTube. My YouTube channel is where I like people to go, but Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all those places.
Amazing, Travis. Thank you again. You are truly leading the way in so many ways. And I know it's not an easy task, but you carry it with such grace and just honor, and major mad respect for you and all that you do. And just keep it up. Keep going forever.
Thank you so much. I'll keep going forever.
Deal. Bye.